Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by University of Illinois Extension and Rural Partners. We are happy to have Robert Sinkler, Executive Coordinating Director of Corn Belt Ports, as well as Anshu Singh, Director of Sustainability and Conservation with Corn Belt Ports, and Chris Smith, our Operations Director with Corn Belt Ports. This is a Corn Belt Ports update. We're grateful to have all of you three on for this third webinar. We've done 2 webinars in the past as well, as our Corn Belt ports have scaled up, and it's always exciting to see the new developments and information on this front. Before we pass it on to Bob Sinkler, I want to recognize that this program is co-hosted by Rural Partners and give a brief moment for remarks from my colleague, Ann Silvis, here at U of I Extension. And then, of course, she'll pass it on to Bob to start the presentation.
Thank you, Nancy. So I'm Ann Silvis, and I'm the Assistant Dean and Program Leader for Community and Economic Development for University of Illinois Extension. But today I'm also wearing my Rural Partners board member hat because this webinar is co-sponsored by Rural Partners, the Illinois Rural Development Council, and University of Illinois Extension. So we're grateful to have you as presenters, and we're glad that people across the state are interested in this topic, and so pleased that this partnership has enabled us to bring good content to our extension audiences. So Bob, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hey. All right, well, this is our third year. What we've done over the last 2 years is given an update, cover a stakeholder update, or use this as an opportunity to give a stakeholders update. We're going to go through this presentation, hopefully in about 30 minutes, and leave quite a bit of time for Q&A. The questions were very helpful last time, and there were just a lot of them, so we're trying to save enough time for that. If I can. My computer is locked up. Just a second. Well, okay. So this is the agenda we're going to follow, and just to give you a brief executive summary, go over what we're going to look like in the next few years, who we are as the Corn Belt Ports, kind of briefly describe the black hole and invisibility that we emerged from, and then go over a few things that the larger team accomplished over the last year, and then talk about some of the new investment in the Corn Belt Ports region. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps, and then leave some time for Q&A. I'm going to let everyone read this slide. For those of you that might be multitasking, this is the most important slide in here. But I'm just going to give you a minute to read it. But this really is a summary of what I'm going to talk about today. It's kind of telling you what I'm going to tell you. And then in 10 years, we want to have a sustainable annual rate of growth of 5%. That's in freight tonnage. We want to be business people and nature friendly. We want to be a business cluster. We want each one of our Corn Belt ports to actually identify as an economic development and business cluster based upon the boundaries that we have established. And then we really want each Corn Belt port region to be able to solve problems and be an effective implementer of interagency integrated water resources management. This helps meet the multimodal transportation infrastructure, natural infrastructure, and other water resource infrastructure needs, to include ensuring that we are prepared for future flood risk or increased flood risk, taking into consideration climatic changes. And then we really want each one of our Corn Belt ports regions to be an organization of action. In many ways, we're already there, or so many of our Corn Belt ports regions are there. I think everyone's aware that we're the most productive place on the planet when it comes to agriculture, and that's really what the Corn Belt ports are all about, is meeting some of the global needs for our agricultural products. And our business model is pretty simple. It's really take the freight tonnage that we have and translate that into increased investment in our region. And then our mission is really increase the freight on our waterways, protect the integrity of our supply chain, raise our areas profile to attract more investment, increase our national identity or improve our national identity, or give us one. And then there is a home ports advantage aspect of what we're doing. And we want to have everyone identify with a home port and use that port to help attract more investment and businesses and people in our region. And then we want to continue to help reduce transportation costs. Corn Belt ports are multimodal. It's just not about waterways. This is our team, and you'll hear from Chris Smith today and Dr. Anshu Singh during our presentation. This slide, I included this slide in the slide deck just because it's got our email addresses if you need to get in touch with us. These are the real key leaders that we have in each one of the Corn Belt port regions. Dan Silverthorne's been with us from the very beginning, and right now he's the acting chair of the Illinois Waterway Ports Commission, in addition to doing other things. And Denise Bulat is kind of the leader we have on the upper Mississippi River ports of Illinois and Iowa. She's been with us from the very beginning, and our transportation professional that helps us out in so many ways. And then Blake Roderick just took over as the chair of the Mid-America Port Commission, but he's not new to our region and ports. He's got a great water resources background. In 2022, late 2022, we added the Northern Grain Belt Ports region between Minnesota and Wisconsin. Right now, Chris Smith is the acting operations director for the Northern Grain Belt Ports. And we should be able to announce someone else on that team here soon. Our inaugural Northern Grain Belt Ports meeting is going to take place on the 5th of October. This is what the Corn Belt ports look like. These are just the riverfront counties depicted. Some of our ports actually include counties off the river, especially if it includes some rail infrastructure or an airport or something like that. But we've got the Northern Grain Belt ports in the orange, the ports of Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois in the brown area, the Mid-America Port Commission at the confluence of the Illinois and Mississippi River in the yellow area, and then the Illinois Waterway Ports Commission is in the green area. But the good thing now is we're all on the map. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but there's some logic behind how we organized each one of our Corn Belt port regions. But they all basically are centered on an interstate crossing of the Waterway, and really have most of them have a metropolitan planning organization right in the center of it, which has federal authority to do transportation planning. But anyway, the Corn Belt ports really include over 50 riverfront counties, 13 regional planning agencies, 17 existing city and county ports, and nearly a dozen regional economic development organizations. And it also includes 2 major urban ports, the Joliet Regional Port District right outside of Chicago and the St. Paul Port Authority. But we've divided except for Joliet and St. Paul, we divided all of these into roughly 4 equal Corn Belt port regions that are federally recognized. But in 2019, we didn't exist. This is a national ports GIS ports database. All the blue polygons show where the ports were, and there was nothing in our area. And we handle about 100 million tons. So we were missing out for years, and we just didn't have the visibility we should have had for our ports. And this is just another map that was used as late as June 2021 that kind of shows that we didn't exist. And this is a map that the EPA Region 5 used on the 28th of July this year with old data, but it also shows all the ports in the United States, and left all of us off because based on when this map was produced, we weren't in existence or federally recognized. And that hurts us. You know, this is you can't invest in a port that doesn't exist. So that's one of the truths. You can't invest in a port that doesn't exist. We felt that farmers needed a local principal port of loading. And we, as I mentioned earlier, our local ports do provide a home ports advantage. So we want everyone to identify with their local port or their home port. Our ports align. Each one of these ovals is one of the Corn Belt port regions, and this is where they shows or depicts how they align with the nation's corn production region, corn producing region. This is a USDA map, and then this is the where they align, or how they kind of intersect or relate to the soybean production, major soybean production counties in the U.S. One of our big successes is the Illinois Waterway was approved. The Waterway Ports Commission was approved by both the Senate and the House in Illinois unanimously. So you rarely see that, but every single Democrat, every single Republican in both houses approved the Illinois Waterway Ports Commission legislation. It just kind of shows how popular this effort has been. This is the actual list of ports that, when they showed up on the National Ports List for the first time in history, the yellow ones were added, and then the St. Paul Port Authority had been recognized. It was the only one that we had in our region that had been federally recognized, so it came in at 76. And after we got our ports recognized, this is what the National Ports GIS Database looked like. And then since then, we've added the Northern Grain Belt ports between Minnesota and Wisconsin. 2 of our ports made Global Trade Magazine's top 50 power ports list. And both the Illinois Waterway and the Mid-America Port Commission, we're really proud of that. This was their annual ranking that came out last fall. And then we're also proud of the fact that in January, the U.S. Department of Transportation ranked 2 of our ports as top 25 bulk cargo ports in the United States. So that's a first for both of those. And then we did get a visit from the president to the region to talk about some of the investment that went into our port region, and we're excited about that. We've had several groundbreakings to include a navigation mooring cell at Lock and Dam 14 on the Mississippi River, and then we had a groundbreaking at Lock and Dam 25 also. But I guess the most important thing is, we created the ports to attract investment or help attract investment, and we've attracted really over $2 billion now in federal, state, and nonprofit organization investment in the region. These are just some of the key projects that we've received money for. Dr. Singh, I think we'll mention again, the Lock and Dam 25 retrofit with a 1,200-foot lock. We received $500 million to do a lock rehabilitation on the Illinois Waterway over 2 closure periods. That project will actually be finished up in about 30 days. And $1 billion roughly equals 6,000 construction jobs. $1 billion in construction. So there's 3,000 construction jobs just associated with the lock rehab work. And then Dr. Singh will cover this, but we received some money for the Brandon Road invasive species barrier, and $500 million for $250 million for that, and roughly $100 million for fish passage. And then we received full funding for LaGrange Lock and Dam retrofit design, and then about $400 million or so more on top of that. But none of that would have been possible without really strong bipartisan support from both the House and the Senate, U.S. House and Senate, and we're really grateful for that. But these are a couple of things that I want to highlight that are a little bit non-standard. We had a gentleman that gave $1 million to Culver Stockton to support a multi-modal transportation planning and efforts and economic development efforts associated with the Mid-America Port Commission. It's being funneled through the Culver Stockton College, but that's the kind of stuff that we were just surprised to see, and there's a lot of examples of things like that, and we would like to see even more. And then something else that this is state of Illinois funding, but the state of Illinois received the largest investment in strategic planning effort ever from the state of Illinois, about $1.5 million to develop strategic plans for these four ports on the Illinois Waterway. And that helps identify new projects or new investment opportunities. We love to see that. And before I turn it over to Dr. Singh, these are some of the priorities We want to get the LaGrange lock over the next 2 years. We want to get the LaGrange lock retrofit funded and under construction. We want to get $100 million of river restoration projects on the Illinois Waterway. We want to get to some long-term resource monitoring stations in the Quincy Hannibal area, one there and one in the Peoria Ottawa area. Dr. Singh will talk a little bit about that. And then we want to attract about $500 million in investment over the next 2 years, since there is still infrastructure money available. So we're working very hard to make that happen. And then we want to, when we started this effort, there were only 2 ports in the entire upper Mississippi River Basin. And both were in cities of greater than 2.5 million people, or metro areas greater than 2.5 million people. This is the Corn Belt. The non-super urban areas, they're important, but it really is, most of the grain's produced obviously outside the urban areas. So it's just good to get our agricultural areas on the map as part of a port. And then there were no ports at all identified on the Illinois Waterway, and that doesn't reflect reality. So we just want to help get the message out there and continue to get the message out there that our ports exist and they're nationally significant and a critical part of the global supply chain. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Singh, and she'll give a quick update on some of the ecosystem restoration work going on.
Hello, everyone. And before getting into ecosystem restoration projects, I would like viewers to know what is Upper Mississippi River System. And I know many of you already know about it, but I just want to highlight that this is the Illinois River is also part of Upper Mississippi River System, which sometimes get unnoticed. And it is also a nationally significant ecosystem as designated by U.S. Congress in 1986. And there is a reason for that, because it provides habitat to at least 154 fish species. And it is also important for 60% of North America's bird species, as it's a migratory route when they fly from Canada to Gulf of Mexico. There are many state-threatened and endangered species in this area, as you can see on the slide. And I just want to have a look on these. I'm not going to read the slide, but the bottom line is it's a nationally significant ecosystem, and we need to protect, restore, and manage it to improve ecological health of our system. So these are 4 ecosystem restoration projects in the Corn Belt Ports region. And in next few slides, I will talk about each of these programs, especially new and ongoing projects under these programs and status of funding in last 1 year. And so for first one, it's a Great Lake and Mississippi River Interbasin study, and it has only 1 project in the Corn Belt Ports region. And that is Brandon Road Interbasin Project. The goal of this project is to prevent the movement of Asian carp and other invasive species from Illinois Waterway to Great Lakes. And it is an important project putting together a series of deterrents to minimize the movement of invasive species. So in January 2022, under bipartisan infrastructure law, this project received new start authorization of about $225 million, and which is almost equal to 25% of the project cost. And furthermore, in January 2023, it received additional federal funding of $48.8 million. So this project got a big boost in last 1 year. Another program in Corn Belt Port region is Illinois River Basin Restoration Program. So the Illinois River Basin it includes Illinois River, all of its tributaries, and also their watersheds. So it's extensive. And the restoration of Illinois River Basin is important because it includes 90% of state's population and also 37% of its surface water. The program received 2 planning awards in 2007, but since 2015, there is no funding in this program, and it has remained inactive since 2015. Very recently, first time in 8 years, it received federal funding for a feasibility study. And based on that feasibility study, Corps of Engineers have now recommended removal of 9 dams on Fox River. And it will be very helpful in improving water quality and reducing water pollution in the Fox River. The projected cost to remove all these 9 dams is about $15.8 million. And as per Corps of Engineers, the dams will be removed by 2030. It's a significant effort to rehabilitate Fox River. And as you can see, there is an email of Ryan Johnson, and there are, it's open. They're accepting comments through Monday, November 6, 2023. So if any one of you is interested in that. Next one is a great program, Upper Mississippi River Restoration Program. It was authorized by Congress in 1986. And as its name indicates, the focus of program is Upper Mississippi River System, which again, I'll insist it includes Upper Mississippi and Illinois River. The program has mainly 2 elements of it. One is long-term resource monitoring, and other is habitat rehabilitation. And actually, the decades of LTRM data collected on water, fish, land use, vegetation cover, it helps in assessing the health of our river. And based on that, we know the need of habitat restoration project on specific locations. And it's a great tool in project identification. So in 3 of our Corn Belt ports, you can see a good number of UMRR projects are planned for future. In Mid-America Port Commission, you can see there are 5 projects worth more than $95 million. Northern Grain Belt Ports has 6 projects worth more than $84 million. Upper Mississippi River Ports, again, have 8 projects worth more than $192 million. But unfortunately, we do not have any project in Illinois Waterway Ports Commission. On that, we are in process of working with our partners and trying to bring more projects in this region. And there should be at least $100 million worth projects in this region. So as of now, UMRR has 6 LTRM stations in total. As we know that LTRM stations are important in terms of identifying ecosystem restoration projects, we are advocating for 2 additional LTRM stations. One in the greater Quincy-Hannibal area, and other is Peoria and Ottawa area. Our goal is to have at least one station every 100 miles or 2 in each of our Corn Belt ports region. Since the federal recognition of Corn Belt ports, there is a substantial increase in UMRR funding. In last 3 years, the funding have nearly tripled from $33 million to $90 million. It's the biggest jump ever in authorized funding levels. As you can see here, for almost 2 decades, program was funded at level of $33 million. In 2020, WRDA, the increased authorization, the authorization increased from $33 million to $55 million. And in FY23, annual federal appropriation for UMRR is at all-time historic high of $55 million. So now, and again, in WRDA 2022, it has increased authorization for $90 million. So it has been really good for UMRR. And now we'll talk about our most extensive program known as NESP. We call it Navigation and Ecosystem Sustainability Program. It covers ecosystem restoration in Upper Mississippi and Illinois River, along with their floodplain habitats, because floodplains are critically important to large river ecosystems. It's a unique long-term dual-purpose program where it focuses on navigational improvement as well as the ecological health of our river. But in this segment, I will only cover the ecosystem projects. So NESP authorized by U.S. Congress in 2007, but it have not received any construction funding till 2019. Then bipartisan infrastructure law came in 2022, and by then Cornwall Ports were also federally recognized, and NESP received its first biggest funding of $829 million. So more than 730, as Bob also mentioned, more than $730 million for retrofitting a new 1,200-foot lock, and about $97 million for fish passage construction at Lock and Dam 22. And as you can see in this table, since then we are seeing a very steady increase in funding. In fact, in FY24, we are expecting an appropriation of $120 million, which will be great. And as a result of all these increased funding, recently we saw many groundbreaking and ribbon cutting ceremonies. I was there on groundbreaking of Fish Passage at Lock and Dam 22. The event was very well attended, and many leaders were there, like White House Senior Advisor to the President and Infrastructure Coordinator, Mr. Mitch Landrieu, and Assistant Secretary of the Army of Civil Works, Michael Connor. So these are good time for NESP. And in FY23, we are expecting 2 construction awards this fall. And that's the good news for Illinois State, as both of these projects are on Illinois Waterway. In fact, Starved Rock is one of the biggest ecosystem projects on Illinois Waterway in almost a decade. And another ongoing activity in FY23 is planning for 8 ecosystem restoration projects. Now, with the consistent funding for NESP, we need more projects in pipeline. And this is the map. It shows all NESP projects that are actively implemented. It's available on Corps of Engineers website. There is a link you can see on top of the slides. And it's a good resource if you want to know more about NESP and location of these projects. And recently, we are really excited about this. The acting chair for Illinois Waterway Port Commission, he directed us to develop a comprehensive regional sustainability plan for Illinois Waterway Port Commission. I'll be leading this effort and planning to complete in 1 year. It will include 10 counties and Marine Highway 55. It will also involve coordination with all public-private organizations along the riverfront in Illinois Waterway Port Commission. So I'm really looking forward to it. And now I turn it over to Chris Smith, our Director of Operations for Cornwall Ports.
Thanks. Before I turn it over to Chris Merritt, what I'd like to do is just make a couple of statements. The first is, hopefully I won't be stealing any thunder here, but the Board of Trustees with Western Illinois University and Cornwall Ports are finalizing an MOU, in essence, which states that we share common goals as relate to development and of a vibrant waterborne commerce. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, what this is about is a teaming effort that we're in the process of working with WIU and a larger group, and it deals really with the business clusters that Bob was talking about earlier. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Chris, you might be on mute.
There I am. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to just say we've really enjoyed our partnership with Riverside Global, which Bob is the chair of the consulting firm, and Anshu and Chris as part of Corn Belt Ports. We're very excited, in particular because of the rural development implications. Obviously, some of us sort of imagine that somehow the waterways are independent of rural development, but of course, the waterways in Illinois and the Midwest are essential to rural community and economic development. So this is why we take great joy in partnering. So I'm going to talk very briefly about a National Science Foundation project that we're involved in that is going to focus on riverborne commerce and port facilities as business clusters. So next slide. So here's an overview. And again, it's the idea here is now that Bob and his team have gone to this great effort of actually creating these new regional ports that have regional identities. The question is, how can we build on that to improve competitiveness of the ports? And so we are part of the National Science Foundation project. The emphasis is on advancing smart logistics. So the idea here is that regional ports are part of a much larger supply chain logistics system. And the question is, with new technologies coming on board, how do port facilities become a more integral and engaged partner to those supply chains? And it's really sort of focusing on two converging issues then, the creation of regional ports and the impact of so-called Industry 4.0 technologies. So how does the river system and associated supply chains embrace these new technologies to improve the competitiveness of the regional ports while also keeping an eye to environmental sustainability? So I'll move on to next slide, please. So here's a little bit more detail. The NSF has this new program, a grant-funded program, looking at regional innovation engines. And the idea here is that by sector and by geography, these National Science Foundation investments can spur regional economic development and innovation. Innovation is the key point here. How can we do things more effectively, efficiently, by embracing new technologies? And this project is being in our particular case, led by Governors State University, but also in partnership with UIUC, of course, and Silvis is part of the University of Illinois, and several other partners, but also, of course, Corn Belt Ports and many of the private sector partners. And the idea is the regional ports are part of the supply chain. And the question is, are we keeping up with technologies? And the kind of technologies that we're looking at in particular, automation, artificial intelligence, data analytics, sensors, the industrial Internet of Things, and quantum computing. How can these new technologies be implemented within this waterborne commerce-linked supply chain? And the other universities are looking at electric vehicles, green logistics, drones, autonomous vehicles, and so forth. And again, our particular component of the project is looking at the smart logistics for marine highways. Next slide. And so just to recap, why are we doing this? And so the idea here is that where we are now with the regional ports is that we've managed to aggregate multiple port facilities, terminals, and so forth to amalgamate the tonnage metrics, which has Bob has mentioned, has moved us up the ranking of how important we are. But the question is, by creating regional ports, we've created new identities, new sets of relationships between private sector entities, as well as between private sector and planning agencies, local political municipalities, and so forth. And so the question is, how can we build on these new relationships to improve competitiveness? And one of the ways to look at this, Harvard economist Michael Porter talks about business clusters as a way of looking at regional innovation. And some of the research on regional ports has basically said, you know, one of the ways we can look at competitiveness of regional ports is by viewing them as business clusters. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then talk about the specifics of what we're going to do. Next slide, please. So researchers have talked about business clusters as being, we might think of these as collective action regimes. So in some ways it's sort of, you know, academic terminology, but the idea here is that instead of having independent entities that just happen to be operating close by each other, we understand that entities within the region are actually working either collaboratively or competitively with one another, but there's ways that we can work with these entities to improve competitiveness. So the idea here then is that looking at simply tonnage as a measure of competitiveness is it's good. It's a good first step, but it's limited and one-dimensional. And so the idea is that by looking at regional ports as a cluster of economic activities, we can see that these regional ports are multidimensional, and there's different ways that we can look at the competitiveness, and then, to be honest, ways that we can intervene or to help to improve competitiveness. Next slide, please. I think we're so
Yeah,
thinking about, whoops.
I think we're stuck. Just
yeah. Well, as we're waiting to get unstuck here, you know, the broader point is that it's not just the metrics. We want to think about workforce development. We want to think about the way that higher education plays a role in this. We want to think about warehousing, rail access, broadband access, regional planning agencies. And the idea is that obviously they're working alongside one another, yes, in some ways competing, but also collaborating. And by thinking about these regional ports as a port cluster or a business cluster, we can begin to see that we know about Silicon Valley. That would be an example of a business cluster, or Route 128 in the Boston area as a business cluster focused on technology, computing, and so forth. But people have been talking about, well, you know, there's a medical technology regional clusters. And we're thinking that these amalgamated, newly created regional ports are themselves a form of business clusters. And the idea of a business cluster is that there are economic spillovers, right? So that when we're doing workforce development, training in one sector, there can be spillovers where some of the training in one sector can help in other sectors. But maybe coordination is part of what needs to happen. And it's really through coordination and collaboration that we can improve the competitiveness. So one of the things that we're proposing in this National Science Foundation grant is that we want to explore how cooperation along the river can help coordinate along the supply chain. And what the research has said is that there's a number of questions you could ask. And what this research has done is it's looked at regional ports in the lower Mississippi, in Western Europe, and they've identified some key variables that we should be looking at in this newly formed regional ports. So looking to what extent is there buy-in from regional planning agencies? To what extent are there some key industries that are sort of drivers of economic development, but to what extent is there a voice for smaller firms to also participate? So that's kind of an inward-looking set of variables, but then there's also a set of outward-looking variables, asking multiple stakeholders in the regional ports, to what extent are they investing in new technologies? What would it take for them to invest in new technologies? To what extent is there a focus on, for example, workforce investment? how are we training, barge operators, terminal managers? To what extent are we integrated between the terminals, rail, and road, broadband? To what extent are we working in a collective way to enhance the way that multiple entities in the regional port are benefiting? So that's what we're intending on doing. In early 2024, we intend on hosting a range or a number of workshops in the Peoria River. We want to focus first on the Illinois Waterway system, centered on the Peoria, East Peoria area. And this is kind of a pilot project. And if we're successful there, we would like to take this sort of template, this planning process, to the other Corn Belt ports. And then also in collaboration with our other members of this National Science Foundation grant, we would like to apply for a larger grant up to $160 million to really create an innovation engine based on supply chain management, on smart logistics, where waterborne commerce will be an essential part of this project. So I'll leave it at there, as our slide has stalled out, but I'll hand it back to Chris now to wrap things up.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Since we're locked up, what I want to highlight is really two things. We just held a annual Waterway Ports Commission meeting, and you can go on to the Illinois ilwwports.com, and you can see all the slides there. And we'll put this in the presentation also. And we're getting ready to hold another one with the Northern Grain Belt ports, and it's again, you have the opportunity to go on and register and view that remotely if you'd like. And I believe one of the speakers is on. So so anyway, I think that'll also be an opportunity for you too. So I'll leave it at that because we really like to get to some questions. So.
Thanks so much. Yes, a reminder to our participants that you can put your questions in the chat now. We did see one question come across. Where could we find more information about the 8 UMRR NESP restoration projects that are beginning planning?
Okay, so UMRR projects, it's a different link. I think I have not mentioned in this, but I can put in chat in few minutes. But for NESP, you can see those 8 ongoing projects on the link and the map, which I have on one of the slides in my presentation. And UMRR is even more extensive in terms of providing information on their website. It's more developed than NESP.
Oh, so Dr. Singh will add those to the chat here.
Yes.
Soon.
Sure, thank you for adding that link to the chat. And that's put in there, then www.northerngrainbeltports.com.
Well, actually, I'm doing some catch up. I said I'd provide the link for the Northern Grain Belt ports. So that's the link for there, and you can go in there and register for the upcoming event.
Oh, thank you for that clarification, Chris. We had another question come in to me, and just reminds me to let everybody know, if you have any questions, you can also just direct message those to me. Some folks might have questions, but they don't want to put themselves out there as sort of not knowing certain aspects of this. And so if you want to submit those anonymously to me, that's fine as well. How do you see maintenance and administration in different port statistical areas being managed? And has there been any role played dependent on the recovery funds or the infrastructure money? And there was a second part to that question. How would you like this administration and operation to progress into the future? So it's sort of a pie in the sky question as well there.
Yeah. Could you read the first part of that again, please?
Sure. How do you see maintenance and administration in different port statistical areas being managed? And has there been any role played that's dependent on the recovery funds or infrastructure money?
Yeah. So what we want to do is just, and this is typical of the Midwest, kind of the view of looking at things. We didn't want to create any new government entities. So we basically formed each one of our Corn Belt port regions around existing government organizations. So in most cases, nearly all cases, we used existing regional planning agencies or existing ports to provide the leadership and the organizational vision and direction for each one of the port regions. So they're in that way, they're a little bit all unique and independent. And there are a lot of grant opportunities that are available mainly through the Department of Transportation that we're going to be focusing our effort on over the next 2 years to attract more investment in the region. Chris Smith is kind of the expert on that on our team, but we're going to pursue several grants in each one of the Corn Belt port regions through the Maritime Administration. So I think that's kind of our next major focus. And then we will be asking all of the Corn Belt port regions to support appropriations requests for the next 2 years. We were very successful, we think, this year in this appropriation cycle. The nice thing about the Corn Belt port regions is they represent constituents, and since community project funding requests are now being accepted and used in Congress and in the Senate, we can have many local government entities that make up or are represented by the Corn Belt port regions to kind of weigh in and let their elected officials know what's important to them. And we're going to continue to kind of since we are the local we are the local representation, if you will, of the riverfront communities. Each one of the Corn Belt port regions are. We're definitely going to let our elected officials know, what our interests are and where they can help us with some of the funding that we need to have to support infrastructure improvements.
Thank you. So question, what inter-organizational cooperation needs to happen around the removal of the Fox River dams as well as the restoration project therein?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a series of public meetings that have taken place, and they're going to continue to support the interagency cooperation, interagency efforts to remove those dams. And what was nice about it is there was a nonprofit organization that actually stepped up and provided the state of Illinois' cost share contribution for the feasibility study. So that organization is already in existence, and I think it's Friends of the Fox River, if I remember right, is the name of the organization. And they've got their website, and they're really doing a fantastic job of being the non-federal sponsor for the efforts needed to remove those dams. So our hats are off to them since they're providing the leadership, the non-federal government leadership in making that happen.
So Nancy, I have just emailed you the UMRR project link, which you can send along with our presentation to everyone.
We had trouble loading it up in chat on our end.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yep, that is a good thing to mention to folks, that they'll receive that follow-up email with everything, and I will be sure to add your link in there as well. And so this kind of leads me to just ask a question in general around the whole idea of the Corn Belt ports. Is, it's very exciting to continue to hear the updates. This is, again, this is the third webinar we've had, just giving updates along the progression of these Corn Belt ports. And I guess, what do you think is one of the most exciting or remarkable things that has happened since before there were ever any designations until now? We have not just sort of the change in scenery, so to speak, but also, what is the most exciting aspect of all of these changes and improvements in your opinion? And of course, you guys can take turns answering that, but would love to kind of hear, if, like, they always say, try to explain to your Aunt Susie or something, you know, why your project is so exciting. So
I'll you know, what was amazing to me was the what the strong support we received from each one of the counties. All 51 riverfront counties agreed to voluntarily come together with counties across the river and adjacent to them to form these regional ports and port entities. And we only had one person vote against it out of the 51 counties, someone in Wisconsin who will remain nameless. And they just were concerned about creating a new government organization. So it was almost unanimous, just like with the state of Illinois' legislature support for the creation of the Illinois Waterway Ports Commission, which really only involved 10 counties in the state of Illinois, but every single representative and senator in the in the state of Illinois voted for that legislation. And it was just same thing with the counties. A lot of questions or a lot of comments about how this, you know, this is a great idea. Why haven't we should have done this before. This should have been done 100 years ago. Just a tremendous grassroots support for this effort. So it just, you know, it's a great exercise in American democracy to kind of, you know, form entities that will help us collectively raise our profile and attract more investment in our region, you know, to benefit everyone. So that it was just exciting to see that, and the momentum was just phenomenal. Within 90 days of us reaching out to the counties, we had county resolutions already, you know, all the way through there. Sometimes I had to go through a committee first, so all made it through their, you know, county boards for approval. So it was just fantastic to see that kind of speed at which local governments can really make things happen and do something great for the region. So, Chris, I'll turn it over to you, and then Anshu can.
No, I think you hit it. It's really this coming together. He's forming these collective action groups, and the counties coming together, and then in the example of the Illinois, the state with tremendous bipartisan support came together. So we're hoping to see the same thing in the Upper Mississippi River and also in the Northern Grainbelt Ports region. And so we think that's important. And there's one thing that Bob touched on a little bit ago, and that's MARAD bringing in some federal funding and specifically going after some MARAD grants, and it's the public-private partnerships. And if there's some ideas or some input or industry or projects that are out there, our goal is to bring the stakeholders together so we can go after some federal dollars. If you don't ask, you don't get. So that's kind of the model here, and also working with some great organizations like WIU and being able to pursue this NSF grant. So we're excited about all these opportunities.
So each one of our Corn Belt ports are really kind of a catching net for federal and state and nonprofit organization dollars. So what we created, and everyone kind of saw the benefit of it early on, was, hey, let's create entities that can receive federal dollars. And, you know, as we've been saying all along, you can't invest in a port that doesn't exist. And just by creating the ports, it's given us opportunities to be more competitive for really investment we should have received or would have been able to receive years ago. So we're just excited that, you know, we've done something that the region will benefit from for years to come.
Yeah, the most amazing thing to me, I'll just summarize in one line, how suddenly we are so visible to everyone that the investment started flowing into the region exactly just after the federal recognition of Corn Belt ports. And for me, this investment is just not only adding to more economic activity, it will be really helpful for overall improvement of our Upper Mississippi River Basin.
Thank you so much, Chris Merritt. I don't know if you'd like to also give any comments on that.
Well, yeah. So you know, I'm just a nice little project as part of you know, Bob and Chris and Anshu's vision. What's remarkable to me is to see how, when we think about innovation, it's sort of like a new piece of machinery or some piece of science. But this is organizational innovation, right? So there's a vision to rethink how municipalities and ports are engaging one another and sort of scaling up. And it's that organizational innovation that has opened doors to more investment and rethinking how ports can be competitive. So yeah, it's been really fun to see this again as sort of a bit of an outsider, but being able to participate. Yeah, innovation happens in many ways.
Thank you so much. My colleague Mike Delaney has a poll for you all to answer about the extent to which you learned new things today. We really appreciate that feedback. We use that in our evaluations within Extension and our outreach. So we really appreciate that feedback. So I had asked you all about sort of what was all exciting about this, but and you had mentioned how much more smoothly things run once you've got the sort of the resolutions and the local government support, as well as the votes and the designation. But did you have any barriers that you felt you consistently dealt with for the different port project timelines, for example?
Yeah, everything moved faster than what we thought it could or would. So yeah, we really haven't received any, encountered any obstacles, but we have identified areas that we need to put some more effort and attention to. Some things surfaced that, had been an unresolved issue for a decade or more. And so we were identifying those as things that we can tackle next. But everything, it was just everything moving incredibly well to get to where we are. And we didn't really encounter any obstacles, any that we couldn't overcome or bypass or go around or under.
Well, thank you. Any sort of takeaways for us today? We really appreciate your time and the update.
Yeah, I really feel there is need of more outreach, because it's still, because these are newly federally recognized, still many people don't know about Corn Belt ports. And we want more people to know about Corn Belt ports so that they can relate with this home port advantage, which we always talk about.
But if you know of an opportunity for us to, talk to any group or help get the word out, or you see an opportunity just to let people know the Corn Belt ports exist, we definitely want to help get the message out. And if you can help us continue to do that, we'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you for that. We'll keep it in mind, and I think you're speaking to the right folks as well when you mentioned the outreach implications. So we really appreciate your time, and we're so happy to have you on. We hope you'll come back on to share updates in the future, and want to wish everybody a great rest of their week, and thanks for all you do across the state, and thanks for tuning in today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.